Hello, this is Sherry, and what I'm going to be going through in this short video is to go through a few slides giving you an introduction to some ethics cases and an approach to use when dealing with ethics cases. We're going to cover the case template that we are going to be using throughout the term when it comes to dealing with business ethics. So first of all, let's take a look first at why we are going to be using cases in the classroom. First of all, a case is going to be a description of, and for the cases that we do, it's going to be a very short description of a typical situation that you might encounter in business. And you are going to be asked to take a look at the challenge or opportunity or problem that is faced by the decision maker in the case, and you are going to need to make some sort of decision in terms of what you should do in that situation. Cases let you learn by making decisions without really feeling the repercussions of those decisions. It is really good practice. We are going to be giving you the opportunity over and over again to identify, analyze, and solve ethical issues in many different settings. So hopefully when you get to the work world, you are going to feel better prepared to make those decisions. The other thing that these cases will do is it will give you a voice for your values. So you'll be able to express your values, your ethics, and you will learn how to express yourself so that when you face a situation where you need to express your values, you are going to feel more comfortable doing so. Now, what is ethics? Well, simply stated, ethics refers to standards of behavior that tell us how humans ought to act in many situations in which they find themselves. And this could either be, within an organization, as an individual, or within governments. And it's not just in business, it's going to cut across all aspects of your life. So, ethics is sometimes difficult to define. It is often easier for us to say what ethics is not. So ethics is not the same as feelings. Feelings provide important information for our ethical choices. Some people have highly developed habits that make them feel bad when they do something wrong, but many people feel good even though they are doing something wrong. Often our feelings will tell us it is uncomfortable to do the right thing if it's a difficult situation. Ethics is also not religion. Many people are not religious, but ethics applies to everyone. Most religions do advocate high ethical standards, but sometimes they don't address all of the types of problems that we face. Ethics is also not just following the law. A good system of law does incorporate many ethical standards, but law can deviate from what is ethical. Law can become ethically corrupt, as some totalitarian regimes have made it. Law can be a function of power alone and designed to serve the interests of a narrow group. Law may have a difficult time designing or enforcing standards in some important areas and may be slow to address new problems. Having said that, when you take a look at some of these cases that we are doing, one of the things you do need to respect is that you want to make sure that your ethical decisions at least follow the law. That will be that'll be a bare minimum in terms of taking a look at some of your choices. Ask yourself first what the legal situation is. Ethics is also not just following culturally accepted norms. Some cultures are quite ethical, but others become corrupt or blind to certain ethical concerns over time. When in Rome, do as the Romans do is not a satisfactory ethical standard. Ethics is also not science. Social and natural science can provide important data to help us make better ethical choices, but science alone does not tell us what we ought to do. Science may provide an explanation for what humans are like, but ethics provides reasons for how humans ought to act. And just because something is scientifically or technologically possible, it may not be ethical to do it. So, if we know what ethics is not, what do we base our ethical standards on? So what we want to do is I want to suggest at least 5 different sources of ethical standards that you can use. And actually, if you take a look in your Althouse textbook on page 75, 76, 77, we do talk about, in the textbook, they have 3 different standards that they use, the first 3 that we talk about here, and I'm going to give you a couple more. So the first standard, or the first approach, is the utilitarian approach. So if you want to make an ethical decision based on a utilitarian approach, this is where some ethicists emphasize that the ethical action is the one that provides the most good or does the least harm. Or to put it another way, produces the greatest balance of good over harm. The ethical corporate action, then, is one that produces the greatest good and does the least harm for all who are affected: customers, employers, shareholders, the community, and the environment. Now, with the rights approach, this is where other philosophers and ethicists suggest that the ethical action is one that best protects and respects the moral rights of those affected. So this approach starts from the belief that humans have a dignity based on their human nature per se, or on their ability to choose freely what they do with their lives. So on the basis of such dignity, they have a right to be treated as ends and not merely as means to other ends. The list of moral rights, including the right to make one's own choices about what kind of life to lead, to be told the truth, to not be injured, to a degree of privacy, and so on, is widely debated, and every country has its own set of human rights. Some now argue that non-humans have rights too. Also, it's often said that rights imply duties, in particular the duty to respect others' rights. The third approach is the justice approach. So this is where we ask ourselves, which actions treat people equally or proportionally? Aristotle and other Greek philosophers have contributed the idea that all equals should be treated equally. And today we use this idea to say that ethical actions treat all human beings equally, or if unequally, then fairly based on some standard that is defensible. We pay people more based on their harder work or the greater amount that they contribute to an organization, and we say that that's fair. But there is a debate over CEO salaries that are hundreds of times larger than the pay of others. Many ask whether the huge disparity is based on a defensible standard or whether it is a result of an imbalance of power and hence unfair. The fourth approach is the common good approach. So this option is where we take a look at which really serves the community as a whole. Greek philosophers have also contributed the notion that life in community is a good in itself, and our actions should contribute to that life. This approach suggests that the interlocking relationships of society are the basis of ethical reasoning, and that respect and compassion for all others, especially the vulnerable, are requirements of such reasoning. This approach also calls attention to the common conditions that are important to the welfare of everyone. This may be a system of laws, effective police and fire departments, healthcare, public education system, or even public recreational areas. And the fifth approach here is the virtue approach. And this is a very ancient approach to ethics. In the sense that ethical actions ought to be consistent with certain ideal virtues that provide for the full development of our humanity. These virtues are dispositions and habits that enable us to act according to the highest potential of our character and on behalf of values like truth and beauty, honesty, courage, compassion, generosity, tolerance, love, fidelity, integrity, fairness, self-control, and prudence are all examples of virtue. Virtue ethics asks of any action, what kind of person will I become if I do this? Or is this action consistent with my acting at my very best? So these are 5 different approaches to use for ethical standards. And one of the things I would probably want to add too is if you were to ask Dick Haskeen, what approach he uses for making ethical decisions. He will often tell you that he makes the decision based on how he would feel the next morning if that decision was on the front page of the newspaper and announced to everyone. Would he be proud of that decision or would he not? And that's often a yardstick that Dick Haskeen uses for his decisions. So your first case that we're going to take a look at here, just a little mini one, and you'll find many of your cases are like this. So Eric, a second semester senior, is looking for a job. Anxious about finding work in the worst economy in decades, he sends out scores of resumes for a wide variety of positions. The first call he gets is for a position that doesn't really interest him, but he figures he should be open to every opportunity. He schedules an interview, which he aces, and in fact the recruiter offers Eric the job on the spot. He'd like Eric to start as soon as possible. So the question here is, should Eric accept the offer? And if he does, can he continue to pursue other jobs actively? So I'll let you take a second there to think about that situation, because it certainly is a situation that many students find themselves in. So let's take a look at the framework we're going to use. So if you take a look, we'll be handing out a case framework that we use every time we look at business cases. And the first section there is situation and issue identification. So two parts there, immediate and basic. So the immediate is, what is the immediate situation or choice that the decision maker must make? And often you'll find that stated explicitly in the case. So if we were to take a look there at the previous case, what should Eric take the job? And if he does, can he actively pursue other job situations or job offers? Now that would be the immediate decision, take the job or not. And if he does take the job, can he still look for others? Now the basic issue identification is often the underlying reason that this has become an issue. So if you take a step back, why did this situation occur in the first place? Is it due to poor controls, a lack of clear policy, or is it because of an outside force that couldn't be foreseen? Now, if we take a look at the case, the basic problem here is that Eric really didn't, when he sent out his applications, he sent them out to everywhere. He didn't really consider whether or not it was a job that he wanted or not. He just applied. And so this is this would be the underlying or the basic issue perhaps that has put Eric in this situation. Perhaps another reason why this is a difficult situation is because of the economics of the time. So that, even though that is outside of really the control of Eric. So our immediate one is, should Eric take the job? The basic issue is whether or not Eric probably should have sent out all of those resumes and job applications to begin with. Now, the second part is the decision maker. Who is the decision maker? What is their position? What are the issues? So let's take a look. In this case, who is the decision maker? Eric. What's their position? Well, he's a graduating senior. What are the issues from the perspective of the decision maker? Well, we'll take a look at those in terms of what's important to Eric. So the issues here, his job satisfaction, whether or not he can find a job, and whether or not he should take a job that he's maybe not all that interested in, or maybe it's that, should he take this job because it may be the only job offer that he has. When does the decision need to be made? Well, the offer's been made to him, almost immediately at the end of the interview, so the decision probably needs to be made in a fairly short period of time. The third section is taking a look at stakeholders. So who are the other stakeholders in this case? Well, the easiest stakeholder in this scenario is Eric. Okay, but who else gets affected by Eric's decision? So here you want to take a look at the case and really take a look at it from all perspectives. So we have Eric, who is a stakeholder, and his concern, like we said, is his personal satisfaction and growth. Is this really the job for him? The employer is another stakeholder for sure. And what are their concerns? Well, they want to get the best employee. And if they've offered the job to Eric and he holds on to it until something better comes along, they may lose the opportunity to hire another top student. Other students can also be considered stakeholders. And how do they become stakeholders? Well, if Eric holds on to this position and then continues to interview with other companies, he may receive another job offer and leave, in which case some of the other students that might have wanted the job that Eric had, they would have taken jobs that were not their dream jobs. Okay. And finally, who else would be a stakeholder here? Of course, the bank or parents or both. Eric has been away at university for several years and has probably accrued a fair amount of debt. So, Eric needs to think about, with this job, it's not just a matter of finding his dream job, but he might have bank loans that need to start being paid back right away, or parents that just want him out of the house. Parents will also probably have the view that any job is going to be better than no job. So the next part in the framework is the tools and the models that you will use to make your decision. So in your case template, we have several different models that can be used. But for the most part, in this course, you're really only going to be using an ethical framework. So we've kind of whited that out on the template, and you will learn in other courses that there are a variety of other tools to make different decisions depending on whether or not it's a case with financial issues or perhaps accounting issues or even operational issues. Marketing as well has its own frameworks for making the best decisions. So let's take a look at how we would apply the ethical framework to an ethical decision. So step number 5 is the alternative generation. So let's take a look. What are the different alternatives that Eric has as part of this case? Well, Eric can take the job and he can stop interviewing for other positions. He can do his best to learn and impress the people he works with and really give it a full effort. Another alternative is that Eric could say, sure, I'll take the job. But in reality, his heart's not really in it. He's going to continue to interview with other companies and really hope that he gets another more attractive job offered to him. And a third alternative is that he could actually turn down the offer and continue to look for other potential jobs, leaving that position available for other students that may be looking for a position just like that. So those are 3 distinct alternatives. So he can't do all of them at the same time. He can't even do 2 of them at the same time. Each one of them creates a distinct alternative. Now, criteria. This is where we're going to go back to those approaches that we talked about. So the decision criteria, we are going to use those approaches that we talked about, and we're going to really consider what's important to the various stakeholders and what criteria are we going to use for Eric to make this decision. So if you were in Eric's shoes, what would be the most important thing to you when making your decision about a job? Well, it could be job satisfaction, so that is a criteria. Another criteria might be actually job security. Eric might be just really concerned about just getting a job, and so job security might be his most important decision criteria. Another criteria could be profitability. Perhaps he's thinking of a job that has a higher salary. Perhaps this job has a higher salary, and he might decide just to take the job based on that. Reputation. The final decision criteria that I've put here is that he might be concerned about his reputation with these various companies, and he might want to maintain that reputation with them. So that's the fourth decision criteria that I've listed. There are many decision criterias, and I'm sure that you can think of other ones that you might use when selecting a job. Now, once you've come up with your decision criteria, I'm going to go back to this. Let's take a look at these four: job satisfaction, security, profitability, reputation, and let's apply some of the approaches that we talked about previously. So we can talk about the utilitarian approach, we could talk about the rights approach, the fairness. So if we were to take a look at this, go back to decision criteria, let's apply some of the different approaches. So Eric might feel that it's his right to have the highest job satisfaction. And so, perhaps he can use the rights approach to defend his selection of turning down the job, or even keeping the job offer and looking for another job. And he might use the rights approach for that. But on the other hand, there's always the flip side. If he considers the rights of other students and of the employer, then he might not choose to look for another position while holding the original job. Now, for let's say for a fairness or justice approach, if he wants to take a look at which decision is going to be the fairest or the most just. Now, it could be, I think if you were to take a look at Eric taking one job and then continuing to look for another one, if he were to use a fairness or justice approach, I don't think that decision would work very well. Even from if he was taking a look at reputation as his decision criteria, it certainly would hurt his reputation. His job satisfaction, perhaps if he does get another job. But on the other hand, if he's constantly looking for another job and not really paying attention to the job in front of him, he might not be happy either way. So you can see that by matching up these decision criteria and applying different approaches. Now, there is no one right answer here. You have to be able to just defend your choice based on the approach and the criteria. So let's go over here. Number 7, when you do your preferred alternative and implementation, the first thing you must do is you must choose one of the alternatives. So let's go back to section 5 here. And alternative generation, we have 3 alternatives. One of the biggest mistakes that students make is they'll list their 3 different alternatives, but then when it comes to the actual choice, they make up a completely new one. And that's never good. So the first thing that we're looking for is that one of the alternatives that you listed above is the one that you're going to choose. So don't come up with a new alternative or try to mesh all of them into one so you really don't have to make a decision. The next thing is you give your reasoning. So once you have given a decision in terms of your alternatives, state your decision criteria. Did you make your decision based on job satisfaction, or did you do it based on job security? And then also state which of the 5 approaches that you can use to justify that ethical reasoning. Sometimes one or sometimes many of the different approaches will give you the same answer. And finally, describe your next steps to implement your decision. Who would you speak to and what would you say? What we want you to do is start to have a bit of practice in terms of how you would actually implement your ethical decision. So that's it for ethical decision making. It's going to be your turn in class tomorrow, and you can take a look at the Althouse textbook on page 170, Minding Your Own Business. Please read that case before you come to class, and we'll be getting you into groups, and you can discuss using the case template and the 5 ethical approaches that I've mentioned, and you can figure out what your decision would be. Thank you.